and this might end up on YouTube, so just so you're aware of
Okay.
that. How old is Nuru?
I already forgot. Nuru should be. Let me pull this up. 26.
And how long ago did Nuru's mother die?
Um, about 8 years ago.
8 years ago? So when you're about 18? I'll probably like be taking notes throughout this a little bit as well. So, Nuru, you are from the Rolling Plains, your clan, outside of the city of Kalimport. Um, but I'd say maybe about 20 years ago, when you were 6 years old, um, something weird started happening in the Kalim Desert. The portion of the desert near the border of the desert and the River Aegis, kind of at the base of the Marching Mountains in the plains there, where your tribe took up home. Um, there started to be some like weird seismic activity. Big gaping holes began to open up in the ground, and it caused most of your clan to decide to move into the city of Kalimport itself. Kalimport is one of the oldest cities in the realm of Faerun, in the world of Toril. It is the hands, the ruling hands of the city have changed several times over the ages. It used to be this dinky little port hub, which is now turned into this sprawling, multi-tiered um, city with a population of millions. There's about 2 million people that reside in the city of Kalimport now, currently. You live in the lower portions of the city, this almost subterranean levels that have been all but forgotten and abandoned. Your mother died 8 years ago, and now you live with your father uh, in a small hovel near most of your clan that all migrated into Kalimport about 20 years ago. So you guys still have your small community of Tabaxi deep within the city. There are actually several other um, Tabaxi tribes that also live down here, and so you guys kind of all have this little community of Tabaxi far beneath the upper tiers of the noble portions of Kalimport. Um, Ever since your mother died, shortly after that, uh, word travels pretty quickly between Tabaxi tribes. And ever since your mother died, she was kind of putting on the impression of you guys being a happy family and everything being all right, much like many of the other Tabaxi families. But ever since your mother died, people quickly started to realize that a lot of that was just due to your mother trying to keep you guys afloat. And ever since your mother died, people started calling your father, instead of his original Tabaxi name that has long been forgotten, um, everyone refers to your father now as Sagging Palm. And even though you now live deep in the bowels of a city, it's kind of a dishonor to your name because everyone in your tribe knows that he's a lazy piece of shit, essentially. And you come and go as you please at all hours of the day and night, and uh, there's a lot of gossip about, you and um, in the early hours often, your father often in a drunken stupor his voice can be heard echoing through the lower ruins of Kalimport, calling your name. And more often than not, there's no response because you're probably not home. Stop me if any of this sounds inaccurate at any point in time. So, this is one of those days, but you happen to be home. You're sitting in your room. Actually, once in a while, in the lower bowels of the city where a lot of revolt takes place, the nobles of the city who are still trying to hold sway with their genie overlords send patrols down into the bowels of Kalimport to kill, essentially, those who would stand against the rulers of the city. So, not but an hour ago, blood was drawn just feet from your window in the small hovel that you and your father live in down in the bowels of Kalimport. And your father sagging. What did I say?
Pond.
One more time.
I think it was pond.
Palm, like a palm tree, sagging palm, like a palm tree. Yeah.
Oh, that
sagging
makes
palm.
more
Yeah,
sense.
like a palm tree. Yeah. He's recently run out of alcohol, and this is one of the few times that you're actually in your room to hear his call, and he wants you to go out and get more booze for him to consume. Why don't you just describe a little bit of like what your room looks like for me?
There's a bunch of little trinkets littered about. Some particularly shiny, others rather dull looking. Though there's a sense of just they all have a level of value connected to them. They're all rather mismatched, and none of them look like they belong in a place such as this. Besides that, it's rather bare from personal effects.
What do you think the last thing that you stole was?
The last thing? He was hired to steal a necklace from an old. Alright. So the last job was, I imagine, there was a couple that were separated, and the fiance had some valuables that she was unwilling to give up, and I was hired to go steal them back. And so it's a rather extravagant looking necklace, string of pearls, really.
So like this, were they like a tabaxi couple, or were they from the upper tiers of the city? Were they like
from the upper tiers?
From the upper tiers, so maybe like a tiefling noblewoman hired you to steal back some of her more prized possessions from her abusive husband?
Yeah.
So you're sitting on your bunk in your little hovel of your home at the lower catacombs of Kalimport, some of the oldest parts of the city, and you're turning this exquisite pearl necklace over between your fingers. Probably worth more than you'll ever make in a lifetime, considering whether or not you will return it to this woman who has hired you for this job. And you hear the voice of your father, Sagging Palm, better known by the remnants of your tribe, yell out to you, Nuru! I need more wine! Nuru!
Do you seriously need more wine? So I figured you've had quite enough for the entire city.
And you know, you're gone most of the time. He doesn't even know any better, and he says, all you do is sit around in your room all day and do nothing but be lazy. Don't do anything to earn anything for this family. You're worthless, and you've been worthless your entire life. Your mother's better off knowing that you have never amounted to anything. It's lucky that she died. Otherwise, she'd see
It's
you in this pitiful state.
if that's what you choose to believe. But who am I to tear what little joy you have in life away from you? I imagine you don't have, speaking of life, I imagine you don't have quite so much of it left.
He, was yelling at you from down the hall, basically, in the living space, and you're in your room, and you hear him walk. You hear, the scratching of his overgrown claws of his feet scratching on the stonework as he makes his way down towards your room. And you have kind of this curtain draped over your door, and there, he kind of you can see the outline of his shoulders in the little slits that are on the outer portions, um, and you see him standing there. Your father's probably about a foot and a half taller than you. He's kind of big for a tabaxi. He's very broad, and he's got this kind of paunch belly from just kind of sitting around in the house all day. And he pushes back the curtain and shows the full force of his figure. And you know you're home so infrequently that you haven't really looked at your father closely like this for a little while, probably. And to you, even though he's much bigger than you just see this sad, sunken, lost shell of a man. And he steps into his room and strikes you across the face with his claws. And he says, "You talk too much. I asked for wine. You will fetch it."
You ask for much. You deserve little.
And he kind of grabs you by your collar and pulls you in very close. And you can smell the stale scent of wine on his breath and seeping out of his pores, his short cropped gray fur that's weathered and shedding from, there's patches of his fur missing in places from how unhealthy his lifestyle has become. And he draws you in very close and he says, "You've always been a disobedient piece of shit. You will fetch me that wine, or I will give you the beating of your life."
As you wish. Though it's not like you wish for much else.
And he kind of pushes you back, letting go of your collar. The pearls that were in your hand. Actually, make a sleight of hand check for me for him to not notice the pearls. Ooh, that's not a very good roll. He's pretty drunk. I think he'll make a D20 -4 roll. Ooh. So he came into your room so quickly, and you just weren't expecting it, and you didn't get a chance to even tuck away the pearls. But he's so drunk that he just doesn't even notice that there is this glimmering strand of perfect large pearls in your paws. And as he throws you back against the stonework of the wall behind you, as you sit on your bed, he just kind of turns and stumbles out of the room. And as he like leans on the frame of the door as he exits, he just turns his head one more time and he says, "You better not come back here without any wine." And then you hear him scratch. You hear his long, overgrown claws of his feet scratch down the hallway back to like the common space of your hovel.
I'm gonna now read things. I'm pissed. I flex my claws into the I'm guessing what's the threadbare sheet across my bed.
So, despite all the strife that's been happening currently in Kalimport, there's one thing that's been on the tips of the tongues of everyone on all levels of the city, and that is um, shield meat. It is basically the largest festival that takes place in Toril, uh, but it takes place like kind of like a leap year every 4 years. Um, and it's in a faraway land, far from where you are, but it is known for its fairs, bazaars, musical and theatrical performances, tournaments of skill and magical ability. Nobles usually hold court to hear the petitions of their people and to make renewed trade pacts, alliances, and agreements. It's one of the largest meetings of the people of Toril um, that happens ever, and it only happens once every 4 years. So it stretches throughout all of the lands. Um, More specifically, pertinent to where you are from is there are heavy negotiations going on about the migration of a lot of the inhabitants of Kalimport because of the heavy body count that's racking up between the slave class essentially and the nobility of the city. And people from your clan, people from the lower portions of the city are just daydreaming day in and day out about moving to the upper regions of the Sword Coast or a beneficial negotiation being settled upon between those inhabitants of that portion of the realm and Kalimport for people to come, migrate, live, exist, and find better lives. It's essentially like, uh, um, you know, like when everyone was migrating and the Statue of Liberty was gifted by France. Like it's the equivalent of like the American dream almost. And you're holding this bead of pearls in your hand that could buy you passage and some to this new land. But you have somebody that's hired you for a job, and you probably haven't not followed through with any of your other jobs so far, and that's you've earned the reputation to be now suddenly being hired by nobles to steal back. She's still going to pay you a hefty sum, but it's not quite enough for a ship ride all the way up the Sword Coast to the city of Neverwinter. But it's far stewing and living now from the interaction with your father that you just had. It's the forefront of your mind, just escaping this place.
The idea is very enticing.
You've even heard of other Tabaxi tribes up in those regions that don't live such a squalid life as you, that get to roam the forests and plains of their homelands and move freely without struggle or turmoil. Um, that get to express themselves and live any life that they choose within their clan. And it's something that you've never really known.
Also, such a large gathering of people could provide such rather unique business opportunities as they were.
Indeed, yes. There is opportunity abundant. Much more so than here in Kalimport. There's only really two ways to make money legitimately currently in the city. Joining the army against the rebellion of slaves, which pays about 15 gold a month, and you're likely to lose your life. Or some of the basic trades, armor smithing, weaponsmithing, things that are of use essentially, that will produce, and that is still for the slave masters. Anyone else is basically against the ruling class of the city and is been sentenced to assimilate or die.
Yeah, no thanks.
So what is on Nuru's mind, and what is he plotting?
He's weighing the pros and cons because on one hand, there's a certain honor that comes with a job like this on the follow through. However, there's the chance to reinvent himself.
I mean,
Yes.
you return this noblewoman's necklace. Who knows who she's connected to? You could be next doing a job for one of the direct leaders of the city, one of the genies themselves.
Yes. However, every time he has to deal with them, it leaves he's not a bad person, but they are bad people, sure.
Yeah.
However, there is an opportunity there. The more he thinks about it, the sweeter the idea of just running away, getting out of here. The sweeter it is. It's becoming more enticing. He's gonna slip the pearls into his pouch, where he keeps his money.
Okay. You can hear from the other room down the hall your father snoring loudly. He has passed out.
He was never gonna get that wine. That's one thing.
I'll give you an inspiration for that one-liner right there. He was never going to get that wine. That's going to be your character quote for the duration of the campaign. He was never going to get that wine. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
He already creates enough. He's gonna slip out his window. I'm assuming there's a window in his room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's like right behind your bed, essentially. Like you hear all the patrols that come down to cleanse the lower portions of the city. You hear the combat. You hear your clansmen die. You hear the people trying to escape slavery and oppression get slaughtered. You've heard it all.
He's probably, well, before slipping out, he's going to gather all of the things he would need.
Sure.
For a journey.
So, Actually, I'd like you to roll a D100 for me.
Okay. Got a 13.
So, on one of the jobs that you did before this one for the pearls, you were in another more nobler person than you. You were in their house, and doesn't really matter what you were meant to steal, but while you were there, you opened a drawer and you saw a little key. And the only reason that it caught your attention was because on the head of the key there was a little question mark engraved in it. And you just felt compelled to pocket it. So add mystery key to your character sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a better name than question mark key.
yeah. Other than that, I'm not going to give you any more information about it, but it's something you stole before the pearls, and it's part of your belongings now. But you do gather the rest of your belongings, including your iron crowbar and your golden crowbar.
Oh.
And what do you do? And what do you do?
Well, it's gonna stick to the shadows to try to avoid as much as the unpleasant activities as possible.
Sure. Where are you going?
What were the options again to head to the city?
I mean, if you you could trade the pearls for passage to almost anywhere. You could sell the pearl or give the pearls back to the noble tiefling woman, and she'll pay you a hefty sum, but it won't be enough to get you out of Kalimport. It would be enough to move you to the upper class of the city. But passage out of here currently is a high price because of what's going on. Sailors, people with ships, are just exploiting the shit out of people right now. You could return the pearls, get your pay, and find another job. You could essentially do whatever you want. I'm not trying to railroad you into anything. It's your choice. It's just your choice now. But make a stealth check for me to not be noticed by those down patrolling the lower streets of the city currently. Ooh, good. So you gather your belongings. One of the only times you put on your dark hooded cloak is when you leave your home. So you do. You sit on this little stone sill of your hovel down deep in the bowels of Calimport. With a heavy sigh, you take one last glance at maybe the last time you ever see this little room again. And with all your belongings, you hop out into the bloodied streets of Calimport, the lower tiers of the city. Um, there's a long stone alleyway, essentially, when you hop out your window. Um, much like the window you just hopped out of, there are windows that line the streets, and also many doors that are essentially covered by curtains, much like the one hanging between your room and the like living space of your hovel. There aren't a lot of like wood doors down here. It's all a lot of coverings with like worn out drapes and um, anything that people can scrounge up to give them a sense of privacy. And to your left, down the alleyway, is a recent scrimmage that you heard. Um, you heard shouting and um, people being cast as heretics and um, betrayers of the rulers of the city, and a short, very short combat ensued. And you just heard a deep feminine voice commanding them to drop the bodies in the sewers and move on. Um, to your right leads up to a pathway that you know that you've traveled many times before, kind of a secret way up through the inner portions of the city, up to the middle and upper tiers.
He is going to be trying to get to the docks, but he's going to stick to the safer, or at least the passage he knows.
Sure.
What's going on to the... There's his...
So, this little secret way that you know of, kind of, you take a right, and you actually go into another tabaxi of your clan's hovel. You stand outside their door for a moment, listening to see if you hear any movement, and you kind of, by this point, know their behaviors, essentially. And as soon as you hear that nobody's going to see you, you slip in through the sheet covering their doorway, and they have kind of a crumbled opening in the top of their house, and so you kind of dart your way in and pull yourself up to the rooftop of their house, and you kind of snake your way up to the middle tier of the city where a lot of the craftsmen kind of live. And so up here you can kind of take down your hood. From time to time, many of the slaves that make their way out of complete slavery make their way up into being craftsmen. So they are still regulated heavily by the rulers of the city. They are watched, and most of the money that they make for their craft are still taken by the rulers, and but they still have more freedom than the slaves do, which is none. They have free time. But they have to provide whatever services necessary for their leaders, and they are a mix of tabaxi and tieflings and primordials. And you feel a little more comfortable up here. There's probably places that you are familiar with, that you've established relations with, that give you food, and you probably have friends here on this tier of the city. And from time to time you pass by a stall where you know someone and they smile and nod at you, but you're kind of on a mission right now, still a little steaming from the last interaction with your father. And from here, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump up to the upper levels of the city, where again, now your presence is going to be more noticed. Tabaxi don't make their way up this high. Mostly it's noble primordials who are children or descendants of long lines of the city of Ifriti and genies that run the city, who are royalty, as well as the tieflings who have made their way up to nobility and positions of importance, merchants, and agents of information and exploitation. And again, to not be noticed, to make your way to the docks, I'll need a stealth check from you to blend. Oops. But you know the right places to stand at the right time. You know the heart of the city, essentially. You know the way it beats. You know the way the people move. You know the way the guards patrol. And in the blink of an eye, you find yourself at the docks of Kalimport. Several, well, here it gets a little more slavey again. Half-orcs and other burly types load crates and barrels, hoist sails, and prepare ships for journeys off into the great seas of Toril. Almost any ship at this point is available to hire to take you anywhere else but here. Your main goal is finding the one that takes you where you want to go. There's about 10 ships docked in the harbor, the massive harbor of Kalimport currently, and all you need is the appropriate coin to make your way off of this portion of the world that's wrought with strife.
Are there any of the ships that look more likely to head to the destination he wants to go than the others?
What are you proficient in? Let's see.
Deception, insight, investigation, perception, persuasion, sleight of hand, and stealth.
I would say you can make an insight. They're the same, but so this is more for character flavor. Insight or investigation. It's up to you.
I'll go with insight.
So you do notice there's 2 ships that are much larger than most of the others and are loading a lot more goods than many of the other ships, which would probably indicate that they're making longer journeys. One of them has a stark white sail with a big blue eagle on its largest sail. A lot of the wood is very kind of a deep. The wood of the ship is like a deep brown, and it looks like kind of brand new. And the other ship is looks a little more worn. There's kind of patchwork planks in some of the hull, and there's a big blue sail with like a kraken emblazoned in gold.
Kraken. He's going to head towards the older looking ship, the more worn one.
So you can see, like, well, not more that you can see, but you can hear as you start getting closer to that ship. A commanding, a very snappy, deep voice of a. As you approach, you see this tall, 7 feet tall, half orc woman with this long black braid draped down her back, snapping commands at sailors and slaves. You move this crate here! No, you fucking idiot! That's the wrong place! These aren't ready to be loaded until our third stop! Just barking orders at her crew. Nobody is like making a second step or guess at her commands. Clearly, probably the captain of this ship. She's standing up near the helm. There's a but her voice just booms and rings out over most of the noise, even of any portion of this part of the docks of Calimport. I mean, she's just like, she's so commanding and loud that she just drowns out most of the other noise of the docks. And you can see that the ships on either side of her have even like given her ship a wider berth than is natural. Like there could be more room for another ship to park here, kind of, but nobody has pulled up next to her. And but she's kind of up on the deck of the ship near the hull, near the wheel, basically, and her ship is very large. So there's a plank that leads up. There are cranes that are currently bringing on big pallets of nondescript covered barrels and crates onto the deck of the ship. People are bringing down stuff that's being loaded on down into the hull, and she's just commanding all of this kind of chaos that's going on. And there's kind of a breeze up here, so her big blue sails are just kind of billowing and snapping above, as you now can kind of smell and feel the sea air rustling your fur, and the little tufts of your ears are kind of flapping, in the wind. And the tenseness and the animosity that you are feeling clamoring up through the city almost melts away, I think, a little bit as you just kind of smell this freedom. Holding in your hand, you have passage to anywhere any one of these ships is sailing.
And when he first hears her voice, his ears are going to he's going to flatten his ears to his head for a moment, just mutter, pleasant. But his posture is more relaxed, and he's going to call up to her, Captain, and make his way even closer to the ship.
So you're just making your way to the ship and yelling out, Captain?
Mm-hmm.
I would say,
just to grab her attention.
Yeah, I would say make a charisma check. Just flat charisma, yeah. 22. Wow. So despite all this noise and activity going on the ship, the attention of this hulking orc just snaps right and looks down at you at the edge of the dock, and just instantly meets your eyes. And she just calls out to you, and she says, "What is it? No one is able to grab my attention in this way."
Then it appears I am someone special.
Many people have thought that before. You don't look so special.
then I'm doing something right.
Well, you've sparked my attention. Your voice rang out among all this chaos, and what is it that you ask of me? I don't have all day, Tabaxi.
I require passage.
Well, as you well know, everything has a price. Come aboard, and we'll speak of it. Men, clear the way! Allow this Tabaxi on board.
My thanks, Captain.
And then she just begins to go, like, back to barking orders at her crew. Once you finally make your way up on deck near the helm, she says, my name is Captain Nija, and this is my ship, the Blue Kraken. You seek passage. Well, I have a high price. Where is it you wish to sail?
What's the name of the city again?
Neverwinter.
I wish to go where most do these days. Neverwinter. He's going to, like, flip open his pouch and just, like, position it just so she can see inside.
Mm-hmm. The pearls
Will
are
this
like
cover?
right on top.
Mm-hmm. Will this cover your cost?
A wide grin creeps across her face. You can see she's missing like 3 teeth on the left side of her jaw, and her tongue is actually like been cut out on the front part of it. Like she's missing like the first 1/4 of her tongue in her mouth. And now that you're a little closer to her as well, you can see she's like heavily scarred. She's got a big 2-handed scimitar strapped to her back, and one of her eyes is kind of like a cloudy white, and but she grins nonetheless, and she says, I love accepting noble women's jewelry as payment. Yes, this will get you where you want to go, but Neverwinter is our last stop before I head for the Moonshays. You'll be on our ship for quite some time, but for this price, I can find you a private quarters.
I'm much indebted to you. You have done me a great service.
She says, if you want to earn a few of those pearls back, I recently lost my lookout to a bit of trouble on the high seas, I guess you could say. If you're a good lookout, I'd be willing to pay you on the journey.
My eyes are better than most. I am intrigued.
She says, very well. And she pulls a brass spyglass out of a black leather pouch hanging kind of off the back of her hip. She hands it to you, and she says, you'll be taking up the night shift. You Tabaxi have dark vision, right?
We do.
She says, very well. She snaps the pearl necklace in half and hands half of it to you. And she says, as long as you keep us out of danger from smashing into any cliffs, and warn us ahead of time of any incoming ships, you'll earn your keep.
Thank you. He bows his head a little bit, and he replaces, or he puts back. He returns half the pearls back to his pouch.
Yeah. So half that pearl necklace is worth 750 gold. There are I'm just going to make this even for myself, because it'll come in handy later. So, we'll say 600. We'll say 600. You have 6 pearls worth 100 GP each.
That is quite nice.
And Nija says, we aren't going to be leaving for about another 8 hours, so if you have any final business in the city, you better take care of it now.
I'm done with this city.
She kind of hackles and she says, I've never liked coming to Kalimport, but this is where the money is now. I'm smuggling out 50 others just like you, though none of them paid quite as high a price. Then again, none of them are traveling quite as far as you.
I told you I was special.
Well, I guess what they say is true. I should never I should never judge a ragged book by its cover. And she barks to one of the members of her crew to come and show you to your quarters. So this ship is so big that it actually has 3 levels. There's the main deck, there's the middle level of the ship, which is essentially like a mess hall, a few of the higher ranking people on the ship's quarters, and then the bottom portions of the ship where most of the cargo is stored, most of the other crew lives, and there's also like a row deck down below for when there's not enough wind and they need to have people row the ship. So one of the crew members takes you to the middle portion, just off the mess hall, into essentially what is a small storage closet almost, but there's a cot hanging off one wall, and there's a open portcullis on the hull, so you're essentially right next to the hull of the ship, and there's no window or anything, it's just open air, so the sea mist air is kind of coming in, and it's just this there's this small nightstand basically bolted to the floor, and a little cot that's kind of hanging off the side wall of this narrow little room that you are now the singular occupant of. And the crew member just basically shows you where you are, never really says anything to you, and just goes back up to the top deck where he's been loading crates for most of the day. And you've bought yourself passage to the city of Neverwinter, where in about 3 weeks' time you will arrive, and a few days after that the festival of Evermeet will take place. Shieldmeet, sorry. Shieldmeet, yeah.
He's going to survey his room and place most of his belongings under his bed, or under his cot, I should say. And does the cot have a pillow?
It does, yeah.
Beneath that, he's going to slip a dagger.
Okay.
No, just insurance.
Do you do anything on the ship for the next 8 hours or so before it leaves port?
Yeah, he's going to get a feel for a ship, figure out where everything is. make himself known with the crew, try to create maybe a sense of camaraderie, not for any genuine affection, but rather because that would suit him more than he'll be better receptive. It'll be easier if there's a better reception of him within
Yeah,
the ship.
sure. So give me a investigation check to get to know the ship a little bit. Ooh, 17. So you actually get a lay of the ship pretty quickly. You hit the mess hall that's right near your room. You do a little loop around the middle portion of the ship where you recognize most of the higher ranking members' quarters lie, who are far more extravagant than yours. And then you make your way down into the bowels of the ship. And you're kind of poking around down there, and you just notice that like something's off. Like there should be more space. Like you hit a wall, and it's like, well, above on this level there's stuff, like there's rooms, there's space. But there's this portion of the ship that's kind of blocked off, and it's just plank boards, and there's no real door that you can notice or anything, and but it's just unnatural, unusual. It seems like the space should be being utilized for something, but it's not. It's kind of blocked off. Give me a charisma check to establish a rapport with the crew you might be working with. Man, killing the rolls. Actually, the crew is mostly half orc, like most of the prominent members of the crew. Much like the captain, she seems to keep to her kind. Most of the crew above deck, are heavy lifters, burly half orc men. The crew's cook is a kind of surly, very old, like kind of hunchbacked, gray-haired half orc woman, who kind of jokes with you and pokes at you. Um, um, the first time you come and get a meal, and she seems to grow like a little fond of you. It's nice for her. It's kind of a change of pace for her. Besides of all these half orc dullards, basically, and most of the crew also noticed, like they definitely saw your exchange with the captain. They saw the captain hand you back half the payment you offered, basically, for your passage, and saw you instantly get a job on the ship, which many of those half orcs were probably dying for. And so, I mean, maybe some of them like are intrigued by you. Maybe some of them kind of hate your guts. Either way, um, you do definitely develop at least a passing respect for much of the crew, because the captain's word is law, and at least all of the crew recognizes that, and nobody's going to challenge you for your position that you just purchased, essentially. And they're all definitely waiting with bated breath for you to fail. Uh, so you make a few friends, or at least acquaintances. Nobody really outwardly scrutinizes or challenges you on your new position in the ship. And when you go to sleep on your first night of the voyage out of your home and into a new land, you can't help but have your last thought before you drift off into dreamland be that strange wall on the lower level of the ship that seems to serve no purpose. And I have to pee, so I'm going to do that.
Huh?
And I have to pee, so I'm going to do that real quick.
Okay.
If you got to get up and take a little break.